Our guest is Nicholas W. Stuller, the founder and CEO of MyPerfectFinancialAdvisor, a matchmaking site for investors and advisors. Nick is also the author of The Truth Shall Set Your Wallet Free, Secrets to Finding the Perfect Financial Advisor, published by Post Hill Press. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
Good to have you. So let's dive right in. How can advisors get the most from an advisor relationship?
So investors really need to think in terms of an advisor being a relationship as opposed to getting your taxes done, not to diminish the relationship with your CPA, but with the CPA, you hand over documents, you answer some questions, it's done, it's a transaction. Next year, you talk again. Not so with an advisor. You need to share information. You need to ask questions when you hear something that you don't understand. And to get the most, you really need to think about your financial advisor being a relationship. As your life changes and morphs, they need to understand this. And you're working together for whatever your goals are. So most people don't think of advisors that way. But that's the way they really need to in order to maximize the relationship.
Well, and in a relationship, of course, the investor, the client, needs to ask a whole bunch of questions of the advisor to figure out if they're a good fit and make sure they're comfortable with them. I always say you got to like them, you got to believe them, you got to trust them. If you don't like them, it's not going to work. If you don't believe what they say, meaning you don't think they have the raw ability and they don't have the knowledge, that it's not going to work. And if you don't trust them, well, run, not walk, right? The flip side of that is that the advisor is going to be asking the client a bunch of questions if they're doing their job right? They're not just plugging them, oh, I think you're this, and plug them into a portfolio. They really want to make sure that they're providing the right advice for that client. So to do that, they have to ask all these questions. Well, in that process, are there things that the client shouldn't necessarily tell the advisor, or should it just be an open book?
It really should be an open book. And that means you need to trust your advisor. And it also means you can't be ashamed of where you're at in life.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem, self-shame with finances, especially in the United States. So that's one issue. You can't worry about where you're at or the mistakes you make, because everybody makes mistakes. And your advisor's seen everything, and statistically much worse than what you think you're in. It's got to be an open book.
Yeah.
Even I have friends who keep some of the portfolio for themselves and manage it, and they give some to their advisor, kind of in an internal horse race, but they don't tell the advisor about the self-managed stuff, which I tell them, you're really hurting yourself.
Right.
Because your advisor is not giving you the optimal advice. For example, if you've got an enormous position in Apple, they don't know that. They can't do their job optimally. So you can't be afraid of holding back. It's a mistake.
Well, and here's a little news bulletin for everybody watching, Nick, is advisors make mistakes too. They're not perfect at even making financial decisions for themselves. So, there's no shame, and you're spot on about in the United States, talking about finances to begin with is taboo. And so in that conversation, people don't tell everything, but I like your encouragement of saying, hey, the more we know, the advisor can understand your situation and give you the best advice they can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, well, and so the next step then is with that information, if the advisor is going to work with a client, as they are communicating, one of the key things, of course, is that what the advisor says is received, understood, and comprehended by the client. So how about some of the financial lingo and the terminology that still is pervasive in the industry?
Yes, the use of jargon, and this industry is highly complicated. There's an enormity of acronyms, and it's a complicated industry, and advisors have kind of grown up with kind of using that as showcasing their expertise, but that's kind of missed the mark because you're talking over the head of your client. So if you're an investor interviewing an advisor for the first time, or you have one, do not let even one industry term or piece of jargon go by without it being explained. And don't feel stupid because there's too much to know, and it's the advisor's job. And if you just nod and smile, they're going to assume you know exactly what they're talking about. and they don't. So just pull it out of your advisor. They'll be happy to tell you.
Well, and yeah, you made a great point that you need to, at the very first time, the advisor is using jargon, and the advisor, some may do it to impress. We know that's the case, Nick. Some may just want to feel smart. Some may not think about it at all because they're just used to talking about it all the time. And I think you stop them right there at the door and say, hold on. If we're going to continue, I hope you don't mind, Mr. or Mrs. Advisor. I'm going to point out when you use a term that I'm not familiar with. And so please explain that, because if you don't stop it right there, I mean, it's not going to get better, because the advisors, the quality of their advice is going to be affected, and what's been selected or recommended to you may not be accurate or as precise as it could be because you're not on the same wavelength.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, and I've seen this so many times in talking with investors who are going through the process of hiring an advisor, if their real questions are, and this is in any kind of evaluation process when you're about to buy something, if your questions, i.e. objections, are not answered, and you leave that conversation with questions in your head, guess what's going to happen? You're likely not going to move forward, or it'll take forever. And that's not good for anybody. So it's really, you're wasting your time if you walk out of a meeting and the husband and wife go, I have no idea what that guy was talking about.
Yeah.
Don't let that happen. Just ask the questions and take the time. And most every advisor will take the time. And even with what you think are basic questions, they'll take the time to explain it.
And you know what? I'm going to go one step further, Nick. Come in with a list of questions. And you know what? I think any good advisor is going to welcome the questions. And if you want to prepare them and send them in advance, you can do that. But here are the things I want to go over. I don't want a sales pitch. I've been to your website. I know who you are. Or John or Susan said you're a great advisor. But I've got a bunch of questions. And I think most advisors that are really serious about understanding their clients' needs are going to be willing to stop and adapt and go over the questions that the client has. I mean, I don't see anything unreasonable about that at all.
No, it's a great point to send the questions in advance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great idea.
I've got 100 of them they should ask. All right, Nick. Nick Stuller, My Perfect Advisor. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, David. It was a pleasure.